Welcome to Inspiring Women in Audit, the only podcast celebrating the achievements and journeys of women in the internal audit industry. In each episode, we spotlight the extraordinary stories, insights, and expertise of these dynamic professionals. Our aim is to amplify their voices, inspiring a new generation of women auditors to share their knowledge, experiences, and unique perspectives. Remember to check our show notes for links to our social media channels and to subscribe to the Inspiring Women in Audit newsletter. This podcast is brought to you by I4 Global Results Limited, the audit communication experts, dedicated to transforming your audit reporting and your audit results through communication, optimization, and collaboration. Now, let's dive into this episode of Inspiring Women in Audit.
I'm excited to welcome Anamika Roy to the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast today. Anamika is the Director of IT Audit and Data Analytics at Old Republic General Insurance Group, where she oversees everything from SOX and cybersecurity reviews to AI governance and data-driven assurance. Anamika holds a CA from India, an MBA, a CIA, CISA, CISM, I'm not sure how to pronounce that one, and Associate CCISO, and she brings nearly 2 decades of Big Four and industry experience to the table. So when she says she's seen every side of technology risk, she really means it. Outside the office, Anamika amplifies other women in tech and audit. She's an executive board member of Osaka Chicago and an ambassador for She Leads Tech. She's a founder of Empower Her, a mentorship network helping newly immigrated women finance professionals navigate North American corporate culture. And she's a speaker at GirlCon, where she translates IT audit into language that gets high schoolers buzzing about our profession, which I think is a fantastic thing to do. So if you're wrestling with AI controls, building a future-ready IT audit function, or searching for fresh ways to nurture talent, today's conversation is for you. And I have to add, Anamika, which I didn't tell you in advance that I would say, that you were listed as a who's who in America for 2024-25. Which honors individuals who possess professional integrity, demonstrate outstanding achievement in their field, and have made innumerable contributions to society as a whole. Congratulations on that honor. That's super special. And Anamika, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to have our audience get to know you and what you bring to the table.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for this kind introduction. This was lovely. And I'm super excited to be here too and share my experience with everyone.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'd like to start at the beginning and find out what drew you into the world of audit and how did your career take shape from those early days?
Well, I had to become an auditor. It was like kind of in the genes, in my DNA or in the stars, because I was growing up a very curious kid. I would always take things apart to put it back just to see how it worked. And my dad, who was the CEO of his company, he was a big influence too because he traveled extensively for work. And I remember all the dinner time conversations he'd bring back. And it was not just about the touristy things he'd done, but also about how businesses operated across different cultures. And my young mind, that captivated me the most. And there was this other side too, that was maths, and I loved numbers. And so becoming a chartered accountant kind of felt like naturally in place and the most natural next step for me. And one thing led to another, and I felt auditing was my perfect career.
That's very interesting. I love that, maths were important to you and you were good at them and that's what drew you in. For me, it was taking grade 11 accounting is what did it for me. So I totally understand that.
When I was studying for the audit curriculum, I realized that auditing kind of satisfied both analytical and my curiosity side. And I felt like I could feel over the years when have been doing my audits, I feel that every organization is like visiting a new country. Every audit that I do, you have to understand like the local customs, unspoken rules, the cultural nuances. And even if you're auditing the same topic from one year to another year or the same topic in across companies, it's all of this that really matter and that really give you context to the audit. And so it's like there has been no going back. I've been a career auditor.
I love that. And I love how you brought culture into the conversation a couple of times already. I like to talk about culture at, I think, three levels, because you have national culture, and then you have corporate culture, and then you have the culture of the function that you're auditing, because they can be different. The audit culture is very different from, say, a sales or marketing culture or an engineering culture.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of all those three different levels that get sliced and diced into what you do, and they change the experience every time.
Yes, they do because I have a multicultural background and just drawing that into my audit world, it gives me a very broad perspective and a different way of looking at things, which kind of I think sets me apart from my peers.
I imagine that it would, and I really love that. I really love that perspective that you bring. So let me talk about today. You lead the IT audit function at the insurance company, and can you walk us through what your role looks like and what parts of it really energize you?
So my role, the way I see it, is a conductor of an orchestra. Except for instead of violins and cellos, I am coordinating cybersecurity assessments, cloud audits, SDLCs, IT SOX reviews, and my job is to make sure that it's all running smoothly, everything is super coordinated and no escalations. And this means lots of relationship building with stakeholders at all levels. So that's how my day goes by. Every day is different. So there is no one thing that I do every day. It's just depending on what needs addressed on that date at that time is what pulls me into it. But the part that absolutely energizes me is when I can take something that's incredibly technical and then translate that into actionable insights for our executives. So that's the magical moment when a C-suite leader, they say, aha, now I get it. And here's what we'll do about it. So that's when I know personally that I have moved beyond like just checking a box and doing something and just presenting that to actually driving business value. So, and if we talk about an example, like just last month we had our audit committee and I was talking about zero trust architecture concepts and just saying we need to remediate excessive lateral movement privileges. And I got some glazed looks and I immediately followed up with explaining how when you check into a hotel, you need to get and check yourself into a reception. You don't just walk into your room. And that is the connection that they made that once you check into your hotel, tell them your credentials, you get an access card, only then you can get into your hotel room, right? And so that clicked because of course all of the executives have been to hotels and have traveled. So then they made that instant connection and they're like, oh, okay. So then they kind of understand the concept. And I think that's really important to the executives.
I think that's an excellent analogy. When I teach audit report writing, it's almost always the IT auditors that say, how do I write in a way that everyone will understand? So I think drawing those kinds of analogies is helpful. Probably not for an audit report, but it's that same kind of concept of we have to bring it down into terms that they understand and relate it to things that they understand. And if we do that even in a closing meeting or in conversations, then when that issue gets documented in an audit report, there's more clarity for them, hopefully.
Yes, that's how even in an audit report we try to not talk IT technical terms. We try to bring it down into the business terminologies because ultimately at the end of the day they want to know how it matters to them. They
Yeah.
don't care about the technicalities behind it. So when the reader looks at it and can instantly recognize the business impact, that's when they're going to do something about it. And to do that is to explain it in as simple terms as possible. We totally avoid trying to use jargons into our audit report. That's like a no-no.
I think that's fantastic. And if you don't mind, I want to jump back to something else you talked about building relationships and how that's so important to your success in your position. I also believe that building relationships and maintaining and nurturing those relationships is super, super important. I teach that a lot in the workshops that I do. And I'm wondering, do you have a couple of tips and tricks that you can share with our audience in terms of how you do that?
Yes, so for me, it is focus on communications because when you're building relationships, your communication skills are really, really important. And so everybody, just about everybody, no matter who you are, everybody absolutely needs to keep on upgrading their communication skills. And the one important thing is matching the other person's energy. So if you have somebody you're going to and you're talking to somebody and that person is a small it doesn't like small talks and he's like a very serious person, you don't go in and be like super extra cheery. That'll kind of throw them off. So match their tone. If somebody is like excited and loud, match that tone, because then automatically if you're matching their energy and matching their tone and their vibes basically, that's going to build an instant connection and they're going to see you for who you are as a person, and then not just look at you as somebody who's come to tell them things, but then they're going to build a connection with you. And it's really important to build that connection and keep that connection, because it's, even though you're auditing and you might be seeing them only once every year or once every 3 years, depending on what audit and what organization. But if you cultivate that relationship and keep building it, you never know what inputs you would get from somebody that would help you in another area, because everything is like woven together today. So
I love
that's
both.
what I would say.
Love both those pieces of advice. I think matching someone's energy is important. Um, and I also think that having that relationship go forward over time, like even when an audit is over, it doesn't mean the relationship has to end. You can
Yes.
touch base, you can wish them happy birthday if you know their birthday, whatever it is, but it's just keeping that relationship going in a gentle way as time passes. I think that that can really help success too. That's super. Let me ask you then. So you were originally in finance?
Yeah, I was a financial operational auditor. I did not start out as an IT auditor.
So how did you make that switch to IT audit?
So that happened quite by accident. I was that person, who lived in an Excel, always like diving deep into analysis. And I have a background in statistics and data sciences too. So it's very easy for me to get lost in data patterns. And I enjoyed every minute of it. But my boss at that time saw that, and even when I didn't know, he thought I was flexible more than others on the team just because I had a different way of looking at things. And I would, even 10 years ago, look at the entire population and not just look at samples and do things like outlier analysis. And that kind of made the difference, and he saw that. So when the IT team, so at that time I was not part of the IT team, and the IT team approached my boss asking for help because one of their staff was out on medical leave and did not know when they would come back. My boss offered to loan me out and he came to me and he told me, we're going to loan you out for a few months. It's going to be a different experience, but you're flexible and you should be able to hang in there and do it. But 3 weeks in, I was absolutely hooked. I discovered that my statistics background, I could actually use it, and it was my superpower. And I could like use that to read system logs and user access patterns and performance metrics and spot anomalies. But also importantly, because I had that experience with financial operational auditing, I could translate these patterns into stories and relay it back in terms of business risks and growth opportunities. So that was the game changer, and I absolutely stayed on in IT audit after. Like I did my CISA after that, and then that was what
No looking back.
looking back. I enjoy what I do. It's like learning every day. So it's absolutely amazing.
If an auditor in an operational audit function right now wants to transition into IT audit, what would you tell them to do?
For me, I think the most important advice I would say is to speak the language of growth, risk, and business outcomes, because that's universal. And even if you're an business auditor, you don't have to become a technical expert overnight. You can, as long as you focus, on fluent translation of business risks and combining your technical and business worlds, because you can always ask questions to the technical experts and ask a lot of questions. So as long as you do not pretend to know something that you don't, you will be fine. You can take your time learning things. And even the ones who are technical, it's not like the technical experts know all the technologies in IT. So there's always going to be things that you won't know. So you're no different. As long as you keep growing, keep learning, taking it slow and really understanding everything, you'll be fine.
So curiosity, open to learning, and just keep learning.
Just keep learning. Yes.
Maybe get a CISA designation too.
Yeah. They have come up with an associate CISA now. So even if you're not qualified to, you are qualified to give the exam, but you need that 5 years and 3 years of experience to get certified. If you don't
Yeah,
have that, you can become an associate CISA. So that's
that's
great for
perfect.
the newbies out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they can add to their credentials and their credibility. That's awesome. So I know you're passionate about people, not just processes. And I'm wondering, how do you support and develop your team to grow into strong, independent auditors?
What I do is I try to provide a combination of challenge, support, and authentic connection. So I watch closely on how each team member naturally operates and how they are and what ticks them and what gives them a lot of pressure was the things that they enjoy. And then I build that further by either giving them stretch goals or moving them away into a different direction. So like if I try to be intentional about it, like if I have somebody who is naturally an introvert, I don't try to make him a presentation expert overnight, but I do help them find their own powerful way to communicate insights and audit report stuff. And if he's a technical geek, I ask them to come up with ways to explain that to a storyteller in words rather than numbers, data. So that kind of gives them exposure and that helps them become a better auditor. And I would say the secret sauce is communication. Again, back to communication, because
Yeah.
that's absolutely critical. You have to have that to read the room and to build those relationships that we just talked about. And the real win, I would say, is when an auditor can say that I know you're under pressure because of the launch of this product or whatever it is, because everybody's under pressure doing their day-to-day jobs. But then when you can say, let us together figure out how to address the security concerns without derailing your timelines, that's when the auditor becomes a partner and not just a police like walking around with a stick. So that's what I tell my team to strive towards.
So collaboration. So it's about building relationships, all about your communication skills, curiosity, like you talked about for yourself, and then collaboration as well. I like collaboration for auditors. I think some auditors are maybe unsure if they should be collaborating or to what extent they should be collaborating because it may impair their objectivity. I don't necessarily find that to be a truth. How do you feel about that?
No, absolutely not. I feel the goal of an auditor is not to find faults in somebody. It is to keep the organization safe. And that's one motto I live by, because when you're both doing the same thing and the end goal is the same, the person performing the control also is trying to keep the organization safe. You coming into audit is also trying to keep your organization safe. So you do have shared values. And so you're just helping them doing what they do better, you're helping them being more efficient, or you're catching mistakes, even if it is a mistake, before it blows up into something worse. So you're there with good intentions, trying to help and support them. So you're not their competitors or a police, somebody trying to pull them down and harm them. So as long as that is communicated and they see that you're coming from a good place and you're there to help them, the minute they see that, they will value you and they would take you as a collaborator. So there is absolutely nothing wrong in collaborating. In fact, that's what we should all strive to do. And even with our audit reports, right? Even with our entire audit, when we find something, we instantly tell them. We don't like even wait till the end before you talk to them. And so that's our way of making sure they are with us the entire way of the audit. We are collaborating constantly. They know what it is we are asking, what are we looking for, what did we find on a real-time basis. So it's never like a black box and we'll tell you after 2 months how it went. So that's
I
how
mean,
we
it
do collaborate.
sounds like a really great place to work, to be honest. It sounds like the culture is very open. The culture values this kind of collaboration. And I think that frequent communication is so important. I had
Yes.
discussions, chats, whatever you want to call it, with an audit team where they don't talk about severity of findings from the report or issues, depending on what word you want to use. They don't talk about risk, even at the closing meeting. And I struggle with that because it's not my personal philosophy about having, for example, a no surprise closing meeting.
Exactly. That's very well said because that's what we strive to, a no surprise closing meeting. And even with when you're collaborating with them on real time, they see what you've done, they buy into what you have to say. And because you have their buy-in, they will be also as invested to fix it. So it's not, they don't come from a place of being defensive where he said, she said, and I won't do because you said it. It's more a joint effort like, okay, we found this and now let's fix it. And we are in this together. So that mindset is very important and that helps build trust. So
And I think too, it has to do with the culture of the organization. So it's mindset of the individuals that you're working with, and then the overall culture of the organization. Otherwise, you're
yes,
like
that's
swimming
nice.
against the tide, you know?
That is very true because it is also the culture at the top that does influence to a great extent how the teams behave and how they perceive auditors. And so
Yeah.
at the top too, there has to be a lot of trust in the auditors and the auditors need to trust the executives to have that relationship and actually add value.
Right. And belief that internal audit can add that value and you actually bringing that value to the table after the audits. So I think it sounds like a really good environment to be working in as an auditor anyway. So I want to bring up something. I was snooping around your LinkedIn profile, and you recently wrote an article for Isaka called "The Control Matrix Rebooted," where you talked about the testing loop that IT auditors might feel trapped in, and that it's time to take, I love this, it's time to take the red pill and see just how deep the control rabbit hole goes. So I'm wondering, can you share maybe some highlights that our audience needs to know to avoid the traps you mentioned?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, I wrote this article because I did keep hearing from IT auditors who felt trapped because they had been testing the same controls year over year, getting clean reports, and then watching major incidents happen despite that, right? And it's familiar. It's something that a lot of auditors struggle with. And the problem is we are living in this illusion of control, and that's what my article is about. We are so focused on the middle piece of the COSO framework is the control activities, and we're missing everything else around it. So it's like putting an analogy, if it's like checking if the front door is open multiple times and double checking it, but ignoring your back door and leaving that wide open. So that's, and the problem with when it really hit me was I had a client and we were doing quarterly user access reviews, right? And they have been doing it perfectly for years. They have beautiful documentation. They would mark things up in like green boxes and red boxes, and they would have consistent timings, management sign-offs. Like it looked like a pretty piece of documentation, but their underlying report only captured 60% of the system accounts. And we went and did an IP for completeness testing. That's when we found it. And they had been perfectly executing a fundamentally flawed control. And that's when it hit me, like you need to stop treating controls in isolation. And the minute you start looking at the entire ecosystem as a whole, you will be like much better off. And the control environment, that's how organizations, they might have great policies in place, but the culture may not be supportive of those policies. They might be people who are bypassing those controls for deadlines, and that's absolutely going to break it because in any organization, right, it's the people who make or break your controls. End of the day, no matter how strong your controls are, if the people, that's your weakest link, if they don't support it, you're going nowhere. And then your risk management too, that's a game changer. You cannot have a static once a year exercise. It has to be dynamic to keep in row with the changing environment outside. So advice for the listeners is your path forward is your controls. You have to include all the 5 elements of your COSOC. Investigate your actual control culture. That's really important, and build continuous monitoring.
Love that.
So
I love that. And I like, looking at the whole ecosystem, I think is super advice because sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees, that expression that we have. So
absolutely.
wonderful. We'll put a link to that article in the show notes for the podcast. And I'd
Awesome.
like to dig into another topic. If I can ask you about cybersecurity risks and because they're constantly evolving. And with the work that I do around audit reporting and, communication, all those kinds of things, what I don't see so much at the back end of the audit process, that reporting phase of the process, is any documentation of emerging risks. So I'm wondering, I would like to ask you about kind of the front end of the process then, is how do you ensure your IT audit plan stays ahead of emerging threats rather than just reacting to them?
So again, I want to come back to communications and how important that is, because that is absolutely key. And I mean real ongoing dialogue. I'm not talking about just the quarterly check-ins you have with some executives at the top. These conversations, like we have regular conversations with our security teams and IT teams, and we even just stop by each other's office, water cooler chats. Like that's one of the things I love about having to come back to office, because you get to meet them face to face and build these connections. And they're the ones who are seeing these threats in real time. So having that connection with them is really important. It's going to give you updates as well. And I also believe in going outside our organization bubble. Like these industry forums, they are gold mines. And I
Wow.
actually just spoke at an InsurTech conference in Chicago last month, and the conversations happening in the hallways were incredible, because you have your CISOs, they're sharing war stories. You have your vendors, they're talking about the emerging attack vendors, and you have your regulators who are like kind of talking about where compliance is going. You cannot get exposure to all of that sitting in your office.
No, absolutely. I think it's so important to go to conferences. By the time this airs, the IAE Toronto International Conference will have passed. Um, I was at the Osaka conference
Yeah,
I think it was Orlando, speaking there this year. And it is those conversations that happen outside of the presentation
absolutely. Yes.
and speaking with vendors and finding out what's new and what they're working on is so, so helpful to help, fill in the different pieces of the puzzle that are definitely missing if you're just sitting at your desk.
Exactly. And then that's the crucial part, because you're not auditing for today's risk. You're trying to audit for adaptability and resilience, and design processes that are flexible enough to respond to these new attack vendor vectors. And so I want to share, so we would, because you asked the question earlier that you don't see the back end of it. So what we and our team, we have an Excel spreadsheet. It's a very simple spreadsheet, but it is our threat horizon. So we kind of have a dynamic view of the risks that could potentially impact us in 12 to 18 months. And we get those by talking to the people at all levels. We get that by reading some article, just going to these networking events and talking to others outside the organization, and we put them out there, that my entire team, IT team, has access to it, so they all can look into it, add things to there. And then what happens is we look at that once a week for during our IT team meetings, and the minute we find something that could potentially blow up, because we want our organization to be prepared and be able to adapt to it in minutes, hours, not days and months, right? So we try to go and see how that could potentially impact our organization. And if we need to, we come up with an audit and try to assess the situation. So that's how we try to stay ahead of potential threats.
I think that's excellent to talk about it on a weekly basis. I'm not sure that happens everywhere. What about in your audit reports? Do you identify any emerging risks that have popped up throughout that particular audit that you did, or how do you have those conversations with the business?
So a couple of things again, because we have those ongoing communications and conversations, the minute we see something or I go to a networking event, find something new, and if it's relevant for our CISO, I might go talk to him and I might bring that up and like, hey, just FYI, I heard about this or I saw this, might be helpful. So that's value add because I'm not just talking to him asking him, what did you do to this control and when are you going to fix this control? It is these kind of other conversations that sometimes he would have not heard about, that may not be on his radar, and because I brought it up, he might go and figure out how it impacts, or if there's a new tool out there. Sometimes we talk about those and like, what are we doing? Because sometimes when I see something out there, and I'm not sure. I don't know everything in my organization. I don't know all the plans that my CISO is doing, right? So when I talk to him like, hey, I saw this. What are we doing? So that makes conversation that helps me learn more about my organization. And when I'm doing an audit, I have that at the back of my mind. So I know they're doing something. And one another important thing is when we are doing an audit, if you're doing a particular topic audit and you find something, we put it in an audit report, but we also discuss with them. And there's a lot of times when their companies are not doing A, but they're doing B. And this B is kind of mitigating this A. So you have to give them credit for it. Just because they're not doing A doesn't mean the world is falling apart. So that's how we address it.
And can I take us just super briefly into AI technology and how you're handling it where you are?
So with AI, of course, like the most important thing is when you know that AI is making decisions that you cannot explain. That's the scary part. And that is what needs a lot more attention from companies, from governance, from regulators, everybody. We need that algorithmic accountability, and that's what I call it. Because how do you audit a model that is self-learning, that even the creators don't really understand? It's a black box. And we have this concept about human in the loop, and we are still trying to make sure that that aspect is included, and we try to audit for it, but it's still, if you look under the hood, there's going to be a lot of models that are black boxes in the organizations, and that does need a lot more attention than what it's currently getting.
I think so too. And I think the more we use, the more we train the LLM, the particular LLM that we're working with. I mean, crazy things can happen. I was on a call yesterday where someone showed us the conversation that he had had with his LLM, and there was an original idea from the LLM, which is
Yeah.
scary. I mean, it was brilliant. It was brilliant to see and to read the conversation, but it's also scary on another level.
Yeah, I was reading Grok 4.0 is one of the most intelligent, that's what he's saying, in the AI world, and it's like it can potentially replace engineers because it's building better code. It can
Oh,
give
absolutely.
better medical diagnosis. I think they were more accurate by 40%. They threw out some statistics, but this is exciting, but also kind of scary, you know?
It
So
it it is exciting. I mean, I find I use it all the time. I mean, the old ways of searching, I don't even use them
yeah,
anymore, right? I don't even use them anymore. I open up a temporary chat and I ask about things that I don't want stored in the memory, but that will help me in everyday life, whether it's like services that for my parents or whether it's a particular recipe. I mean, that's just light stuff, but I just do temporary chats for that, right? Because I don't, but I use reasoning models and it comes up with things like I never would have thought of. And it happens, I think the longest search was 2.43 minutes. So it's crazy
lightning
fast,
speed, right?
lightning speed. And I remember I'm dating myself now, but you know, when I grew up, we didn't have internet. And we had, at least back in the early days, if you had to do a project for school, you were going to the library and getting encyclopedias. So like the world we live in today is totally different. And I imagine there's just a lot of risks that audit needs to pay attention to and organizations, but then audit is one kind of control or tool to help organizations make sure they're aware of some of these things.
Absolutely, yes. And there's just possibilities are just endless. You only need to know the right tool to use, and because every tool has its own function,
It's
the
yeah.
key things and its behaviors are unique, but there is a tool for everything today, and you can
And they're
absolutely
coming
use
so
it.
quickly. So quickly. It's hard to even keep track of all the tools that are coming our way. All
Yeah.
right, I'd like to change streams of our conversation and dive a little bit into, because this is Inspiring Women in Audit, talk a little bit more about being a woman in audit. And as a woman of color in a leadership role, how do you think organizations can better support inclusion, not just in hiring, but in shaping future leaders?
Yeah, you're right. Inclusion is not just about hiring and getting people in the room. I feel it's more about making sure their voices are heard once they're there. That's really important. And representation at senior executive levels, they matter a lot too, because that shows the juniors that there is a way
Yeah.
forward. Advancement is possible and there is no glass ceiling and you can get there. But I feel as far as organizations are concerned, most of them, they focus too much on formal mentorship programs, but they kind of not done enough on creating environments where diverse perspectives are actually valued. The best support that I have personally received has been from leaders and allies that speak in my favor when I'm not in the room, or support and defend my ideas in meetings, and give me stretch assignments and create a space for me to take risks and even fail and learn from those failures. So when I have that safe space and when I don't have to worry about how I'm going to be perceived by the senior leadership, that's when you can really truly say that there is a culture of inclusion in the organization.
And I would think that comes down to who we are as human beings, number one, and then also building those relationships where people really understand who you are as a human being and as what you bring to the table in your role, and that should apply to everybody.
Yes, and that's what diversity does, because every person and every background, they bring a certain something to the role and to the table, and they have a different view of looking at the same thing. And we talked about culture earlier, and so that's what it boils down to, because I come from a certain background. I have a certain view of things, and another person who's not experienced that and has experienced something else will bring that to the table. And so once you have that kind of a diverse group at the table, no problem will remain unsolved, because then it's like there's always something that somebody will think of because of their life experiences and life
Yeah.
choices.
Yeah. And I love that, because when we have just such a room full of diverse people, we can, with all those diverse experiences and backgrounds and cultures and age groups and all those things that we're, not supposed to talk about, it really does open, I think, opportunities to find more solutions, different solutions, better solutions, make progress.
Yeah, totally. Like even talking about myself, I moved from India to North America. And India is essentially, at least when I was growing up, it was a very hierarchical culture, and you had to, like, authority was always respected, authority and seniority. Like you cannot say no to your elders, you have to always comply. And then suddenly coming here to US, my first job, and finding myself in an environment where it was acceptable to question your boss and disagree with him, and that was to an extent even expected, or not only accepted. That was culture shock to me.
Yeah.
And that was when I realized that things are different. And for me, the funny part is like I came from a very affluent, very conservative background in India where I had everybody doing things for me. Like, and when I moved here, I was my own chauffeur, I was my own butler, I was my own cook. Like I had to do all these things by myself, which I had never ever dreamt that I would need to ever do. Like food would magically appear and the tables would magically be cleared, and I didn't
Yeah.
know how the dishes were done. Like I didn't know so much. So coming here, having to do all of that, having to restart your career, it left me exhausted because then I went
Yeah.
to the office and I didn't want to be seen as somebody who didn't know something. So I always thought I had to know it all. So
That's a lot of
that's
work.
that was like fortunately my boss at that time, he saw what I was taking on and he was like, we didn't hire you to know everything and we don't expect you to know everything. The reason we hired you was your judgment. You have a task to do, how you get to it, and we are here to support you. So that was my lightning
I love
bolt.
that.
And I was like, yeah, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to ask for help. And that's what I live by today too. And I bring to my team as well.
So how has that impacted your leadership style?
That has in a big way because I have seen and lived through the part of trying to take on too much and not ask for help. That when I'm today in my teams, I live by it. I create I want to call it safe to be human. That's
I
what.
love that.
So it's like I openly say if there's something I don't know, being a leader, I don't shy about not trying to say that. I'm openly saying that, okay, I don't know how to do this, but this is what we're going to do about it. We can start from this, or we can go and ask this person for some information. Like as long as we have a pathway, it's okay to follow that. We don't have to all know everything all the time. But also, what that does is the minute I say that I don't know something and I show my vulnerability, my team and the whole room relaxes, right? And then suddenly some junior member would pop some question and say, okay, I don't know this. And because we have built that relationship with my team too, all of us, we are within the team, we know it's a safe space. We can say we don't know stuff and it's okay. It's not going to be judged against them. The others are going to jump in and see how they can help. And we all learn and grow together. And I think that's really, really important because now my team, we've become such a close-knit team that we're always like checking up on one another, asking for clear if got doubts. And if there are times when we know something, but we still need a sounding board, but you don't want to like, you fear being judged, but we are so close-knit that we'll always ask one another. And I think that brings a lot of values because sometimes a random question might spark a whole conversation and lead us down some interesting rabbit holes, but it's all learning.
Well, I love that. And I love the safe to be human space. I think that's so important for everyone.
Uh, yeah.
Well, let me ask you about some things that you do outside of work. I think the first thing I want to ask you about is some of the work that you do with Isaka and the She Leads Tech. You're an ambassador there. You're a founder of Empower Her, and you speak at GirlCon, which I think is very cool. So what draws you into this and what kind of impact do you want to make with that?
So this is something I was deeply passionate about, women empowerment, supporting women, and it has become a second career. I do spend a lot of time with Isaka, with Empower Her. And as part of Isaka, we have a great team of people and we're working towards like such initiatives such as advancing women in leadership, and we have seminars, we have training opportunities, so that's one thing. But what I'm most proud of is being a founding member of the Chicago chapter of the Indian Institute of Chartered Accountants, and the Empower Her, which is a mentorship program specially designed for women. And through that we help women who are relocating to the US and help them navigate like not just job searches, but also like cultural transitions, professional grooming, and just building confidence in a new environment. And I have walked that path, so I know how isolating and overwhelming it can be. So that's what we strive to do, just give support and provide a platform for all of these women to get out there and shed their fears and rebuild their professional careers.
That's so powerful. And I imagine, you're changing lives by doing this.
Yeah, that's the legacy I want to keep for me. Yeah. It's like when I see these people and when I see the impact, the how much, not just how much I have achieved in my professional careers, but just how much they have achieved and the strategic decisions they are making today. And the fact that they're giving back to the industry and to other women, I think that says a lot. And I love it.
So is that the legacy that you want to leave, not just in your career, but in general in life?
Yes, I picture the faces of these women who I have mentored, they now have their own teams, and it is the work that I do through the Chicago chapter of ICAI, where through this mentorship program. And I want to be remembered as someone who had turned around and helped everyone succeed. And you talked about planting a forest, right? This is my forest. And instead of planting a single tree, and planting a whole forest, because when I see these women I have mentored who are now mentoring others, I know that they have created something sustainable and they will turn around and mentor others, and it's going to be a long human chain of people helping and supporting others. And that's on my non-professional, professional, but like side, but also professionally, I want to leave a transformed team of what IT audits can be. And that's one of the reasons I talk at GirlCon, because just to give a view, people outside IT audit, they don't really understand what IT audit is all about and have a lot of misconceptions, thinking it's checkboxy or you need to be a technical coder and you need to know how to code or you need to be a geek with computers. None of which is true. You have to be someone who can build this profession from compliance checking to strategic partnership, and from there, from the reactive auditing to proactive risk management. That's what I want to leave professionally, and that's what I strive for. I tell all my teams, like, think about organizational resiliency, even in your audit. Think about whether something happens when something happens. It's not even whether it's when, but can the organization bend without breaking? How can the organization be more resilient? And that's what we audit to. We're not trying to look at whether or not you're compliant with something. It's more like, if this happens, are you still going to be able to do business? That's where that's where I strive to be.
I love that. I think that would be a wonderful legacy from in both areas. So Anamika, I want to thank you for being on the podcast today. It's been my absolute pleasure to get to know you better and to have my audience get to know you better. And I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I absolutely enjoyed our conversation and it was such fun here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast. We'd love for you to stay part of our growing community, so subscribe wherever you're listening. If you're enjoying our content on platforms like iTunes or Spotify, a quick 5-star rating from you would mean the world to us. It's a small action that supports our mission immensely. Don't forget to explore the show notes for various links and join our vibrant community on all our social media platforms. Your interaction and support play a crucial role in amplifying the voices of inspiring women in audit and spreading their inspiring stories even further. Thank you for being a part of our journey, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast.